The surprising parable of the talents. A parable is a short story to make something that is not so clear, clear. It's a way to teach a lesson so that you will remember it. This one is unusual because most of Jesus' teaching had to do with the creation around him, with nature and with people and with living things. This time, the story is about money, but not really. Here is the story, the parable in brief. A very rich man who has servants plans to go on a long journey. He tells this to his servants and gives them the responsibility of looking after his wealth. At this point, the servants become more like stewards. What is a steward? A caretaker, someone who is in charge. The master is leaving his property and his wealth in their care. A good steward is wise and he is kind. Noah and Moses were good stewards, obeying God and doing what he asked them to do. Judas was a terrible steward, a failure. Think about this. The master in this parable must have trusted his servants and must have thought that they knew how to care for his property and his money. He certainly wouldn't have left his wealth in the hands of someone who he didn't think could handle it. Each of the servants or stewards was given a very significant amount of money. They must have known the personality and the character of the master because he expected them to know him well enough that they could follow his example. The money given to the stewards was not in dollars, but was in the form of a talent. This is a use of the word that we're probably not familiar with. What is a talent? It was a measure of money, perhaps bars of gold or gold bullion. The master owned all of these talents. He gave 5 of these, 5 talents, to the first servant. Some experts say this would be well over $1 million. He gave 2 talents to the second servant and 1 to the third servant. Consider this. The servants could have run away with the money, but the master had trusted them and he was proven right. The master represents Jesus in this parable. His going away on a long trip represents Jesus going to his Father after his resurrection. The return of the master represents Jesus' second coming. When the master returned after a long time, the first servant told him that his 5 talents had made 5 more. Can you just imagine how eager the servant was to see his master again and to tell him that all was well with his property and his fortune? The servant had no fear, only delight that the master was back. The master was very pleased with him and said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been trustworthy in this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together." The master wasn't just satisfied, he was thrilled. He was so happy with the servant that he wanted to celebrate with him his huge success. The master said those same beautiful words to the servant who was given 2 amounts of money, 2 talents to invest. That servant had doubled his talents and made 2 more. Again, the master said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been trustworthy in this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities." And let's think about this. It was work that was being asked of these servants. The master expected them to work at increasing the talents. They both had to put in real effort, and they both had the same amount of time. They must have been wise stewards because they seemed to know how their master had worked, and they followed his example. These stewards must have known their master very well in order to follow his example even when he wasn't there. Their master expected them to know him well enough to do as he did and to meet his approval. I think that the servants, the stewards, behaved as if the master were still there, doing what they knew would please him. And that is why he was so very happy with them. Since we know that the master in this story represents Jesus, there's a wonderful lesson for us to behave as if Jesus were right here. And now to the third servant. I doubt that he looked forward to his master's return. He had put no effort into investing the talents. In fact, he had only buried them. He had even wasted all the time that the master was away and had nothing to show for it. And the money wasn't his to waste. It belonged to his master. That servant then lied about his master, saying that he knew he was a hard man who took advantage of the work of others. He actually tried to blame the master. This is something we do when we're in trouble and are looking for a way out. We blame someone else. And so, as in real life, we have to face the consequences of our actions. This servant was called wicked and lazy, and the one talent he had been given was taken away, since he had not done the work assigned to him. The rewards which the first two servants earned were due to their work. God's rewards depend on effort. In fact, you could say that this is a parable about work. What can we learn from it? Well, first, that God has given us everything we need to do what he wants us to do. And secondly, perhaps a good question we might ask ourselves would be, can God trust us? Now we come to the other use of the word talent, our gifts and abilities. Everything we have belongs to God, but we are responsible for using our gifts wisely and well. We are supposed to use whatever talents God has given us. We don't really own our gifts, and sometimes, since we all want to be little gods of our own lives, we miss the point. The third servant missed the point. We are to use what we have been given, and we are to manage our gifts well. When we use our talents and abilities to make life better for others, we also receive blessings. We will be happiest when we serve God with whatever gifts he has given us. What is the most precious thing that could be given to you? I would suggest that it would be the understanding of God's plan to give us the kingdom. If we understand this invitation, and it is an invitation, God never forces us, we can have it as our goal and our wonderful hope. In fact, Jesus promises us the keys to the kingdom which comes from heaven, but which is on the earth. Remember how happy the master was when the two servants did well? Jesus tells us that it's his Father's great happiness to give us the kingdom. These are some of the most beautiful words in Scripture. Well done, my good and faithful servant. What will you hear from the Master, from Jesus? It's up to you.